Hey everyone. So I know I initially put out a video where I talked about each of my experiences with our, birthing our children, but I wanted to go ahead and make three separate videos so that I can go a little more into detail with each experience. So I'm going to start with Mason's, and with Mason, we gave birth in the hospital in New York City, and with that one, I wanted to say that for my first birth, it was not an ideal experience. Like having giving birth should be such a beautiful thing, and it shouldn't be stressful. But for us, it definitely was. I'm gonna just start with when I went into labor. So I had already been going. I had already been dilated for about 2 weeks at 4 centimeters, and I was having some pretty strong contractions. I think like 2 days after my due date, Mason was due August 22nd, and I think around August 24th, it was a Friday. I remember going into the hospital. I'm actually walking to the hospital, walking through our strong contractions, and going in and saying like, look, like I think I'm in labor, but I'm not really sure. Like, can y'all check and see what's going on? So we went in and they were like, all right, you're not in labor, you're like in pre-labor, but we're going to keep you and we're actually going to induce you because you are dilated. And I let them know, I'm like, look, I've been dilated for like 2 weeks, and if I haven't moved since then, like, what's the difference now? But I guess they, them being doctors and me not really knowing, or me not really having that confidence to tell them like, no, I just want to wait it out. I allowed them to keep us there. So that Friday night, we went in and right away they started getting me like strapped onto this bed and hooked up to the IV, and they started administering Pitocin, which is a drug that makes you contract, so it speeds up your contractions. So then I was contracting like crazy, and still I was not really dilating, and my water was not breaking. So I'm in very strong pain for hours. Like, this is Friday night, so it's already like Saturday early morning, and I'm contracting and I'm just in a lot of pain. And there was only one anesthesiologist in the whole entire building who could administer the epidural, and there were like tons of women who were in labor at the same time as me. And I remember them just telling me like, look, like you may not get the epidural, but if we wait too late and you don't start pushing, like you're gonna have to get a C-section. So I'm tripping out. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm not trying to have a C-section at all, because that wasn't my plan. That wasn't part of my plan. And if I'm healthy and my baby's healthy and no one's in distress, like why should we have to go to surgery? Like, let's just try to push this baby out naturally. So by that point, I was just in too much pain, so I was asking for the epidural, and they're telling me they're coming. Don't worry, like just breathe in and breathe out. They were giving me some type of pain reliever that wasn't working, obviously, because if I'm on Pitocin and that's like making me have strong contractions, like a little drug is not gonna combat that, So I think around like Saturday afternoon, around 3 o'clock, I think they finally administered the epidural, and it was a nightmare for that too. I'm terrified of needles, and I remember the women and the doctor like yelling at me like, you need to bend over. Mind you, I have a big old belly. I'm terrified of needles, and they're yelling at me, telling me that I need to bend over so that they can administer this shot. And I'm freaking out like, yo, like I can't do it. Why are y'all yelling at me? Like, this is supposed to be a beautiful experience, and y'all tensing me up. So finally I like got into my mind, and I bent over and I allowed them to administer the epidural, and I guess right away I went numb. But I would say that wasn't even a good feeling for me. I remember just like not being able to feel anything, not even being able to feel myself pushing him out. So I feel like that's what prolonged the labor. Like, I had very strong contractions, and I can't even remember. I know they were painful to me at that point, but I can't remember how they were compared to Callie or to Saya's contractions. But I remember just pushing that button, like, like, let's get this epidural popping, let's keep it going. And eventually they had to come in and break my water because it wasn't breaking. And then once that happened, then I guess my contractions started up, getting more frequent, and I ended up dilating more. So then we started pushing, and even that moment, there was so many people in our room. Like, I think we had a choice. I'm sure I know I had a choice to have the student in there, but I believe I like only consented for one person to be in there, and there were many people in there, like coming in and out of the room. So I'm just like losing focus when I'm supposed to be focusing on pushing, and just again, like the nurses who were mean to me earlier in the day were back in my room, so I just wasn't comfortable at all. And in the room with me, I had my partner and I had my sister with me, and so those are the only people who were like putting me at ease. But then mind you, I have like 6 to 8 other people watching me give birth, and it was not good. Like, it was very traumatic, like I keep saying. And finally, I don't even know how long it took us to push him out, but finally he came out, and as soon as he came out, they just like took him from me. They didn't even put him on my chest. They took him straight from me, and they started like they cut the cord so quickly. Like, it had to be like 2 minutes after he came out that they cut the cord, and they started like measuring him, I remember his feet being black from like them trying to stamp his foot on the paper to get his footprint. And it was just like a lot going on. Like, I kind of blacked out. Like, I can't really remember the moments after him coming out, but I remember just like them taking him, and I'm looking like, what's going on? Where's my son at? Where's everything? Why is all this happening? And then I remember in the midst of all that happening, they dropped my placenta like on the floor, or like, yeah, like they tried to put it in the bag, and I guess it fell down, and so there's like blood everywhere. And then they're telling me like, oh, she's losing blood, but they weren't talking about me. They were talking about another patient in another room. So I'm like, okay, am I about to die? Like, I was so nervous. I didn't know what the hell was going on, and they didn't make it much better for me at all. So I remember them finally cleaning him up, cleaning myself up, giving him to me, and we trying to get him to latch, and he wasn't latching. And they didn't even help me. They didn't get a lactation specialist to come in and help me and teach me how to do this. Like, I'm a new mom, a new young mom, and they weren't very compassionate about the experience or the whole thing in general. And then the other thing that really killed me was I gave birth at 3 in the morning. So they told me that my partner wasn't allowed to stay overnight with me. Like, he had to go. So that was another thing. Like, for me, that was so heartbreaking. I'm like, we just had this baby, and you mean to tell me that I have to stay here in this hospital overnight with people who haven't treated me well, by myself with the baby. So I'm like having to go to the bathroom and having to experience all these things by myself, like walking there by myself and having to tell the nurses like, can someone watch the baby? Like, I have to go pee, or, it was just really bad. And just, like I said, they weren't compassionate. They were kind of forcing formula down my throat. They were giving me like the Similac little bottles that they give you at the hospital. And they're like, you can do this if you feel like you're not able to nurse. And I'm just like, can somebody help me? Can somebody show me? Because I wasn't trying to use formula. I was trying to breastfeed. That's the one thing I was sure about, that I didn't want to give my son formula. I didn't know why, but I just know I knew I didn't want to. And thankfully, I did tear with him, and I want to blame that on the stress that I was experiencing during the labor. But thankfully, it wasn't too bad, that they did stitch me up, and I was able to leave the hospital within a day. So yeah, I think I spent just one day. Like, I got some rest. So like I said, I gave birth at 3 in the morning, and I think I ended up just staying the day there, and then I ended up leaving the next morning, early morning. And yeah, they gave him all the shots and all that stuff, because again, I wasn't really conscious. We weren't really conscious at this point in our lives, so we let them do whatever they felt like they had to do with him. And yeah, so I remember leaving the hospital feeling like, man, if this is what birth is and what labor is, like, I don't want to ever do this again. Like, I was grateful that I had a healthy baby and I was alive, and because there was just so many things that I was thinking could happen during the labor and stuff, being a young mom. And I was just glad that it was over and I didn't have to deal with it anymore. But yeah, so that was my experience with Mason, and it was, I want to say it was so um such a stressful situation that, you know, my partner and I looked at each other like never again, like we're never having kids again if this is the way it has to go. So that's my story with Mason. If anyone has any other questions, I feel like it was pretty straightforward. It was at the hospital. It wasn't a good one. And yeah, like if you have any other questions, definitely let me know. This was in 2012, so I know there has been a lot of changes. There's a lot more compassion when it comes to you know, labor and delivery and stuff like that. But that was my experience, and that's the reason why I would never give birth in the hospital again unless I absolutely had to. But yeah, I hope I was able to answer any questions. And if you have any other questions, feel free to DM me or comment below.